Hey friends, criminal defense attorney Ryan Pacyga here, and today I'm going to talk about a situation where, let's say somebody's committed a crime and they know they've done it and they're charged and they just know they're guilty. And their goal isn't necessarily to get out of the case, but rather to probably get punished as little as possible. There's kind of three ways to approach a criminal case. The first is perhaps somebody is wrongfully accused of a crime that they never committed, or they're overcharged. In other words, they're charged with a more severe crime than they actually committed. That'll be the subject of another video. Then the next one is, well, I've done something, but they're not sure that the government can prove it, and they don't want to plead guilty to something. They'd rather go to a trial, or at least go through the process far enough to see and kind of weigh their options. That's for another video as well. But this one is going to be about this situation. There are times where somebody's caught red-handed, or they just know flat out, look, I've done something wrong. I want to admit to it. I'm already charged, and I don't want to play games in the court process. I just want to and try to make things right, so that they can feel better about do the next right thing. And that's what this video is really going to focus on. And there's a couple. While every case is unique and how to deal with that, an experienced lawyer can assist someone going through that process. And I think that begins at first by asking a client. What I like to do is ask a client, what are your goals here? All right? Because a lawyer has a duty to follow someone's goals unless they're unethical. But some lawyers, I think, overlook that step, and it's important to ask the client, what are your goals here? What are you looking to do here? Because it's not ultimately about what the lawyer wants to do in the case. You can depend on us for guidance and advocacy, but we do have a duty to listen to what your goals are in the case, and as long as they're not unethical, we can pursue those goals for you. And sometimes the best thing that someone can do is admit wrongful conduct early and try to make it right by doing the next right thing or taking steps so they're not going to be caught up in a situation like this again. And that's because a lot of people, in my experience in over 20 years of doing this now, a lot of people come into the criminal justice system and they haven't led bad lives. Nobody's perfect, but a lot of them are good people who either got caught up in a situation quickly without much judgment, or they just fell off of the otherwise good life they've led and they've gone down the wrong path for a while, but they're not bad people. And in those cases, a lot of times people feel remorse for what they've done, and then they and their family members say, listen, this isn't who they are, right? That he's not this person or she's not this person. Yes, they did this thing, but this isn't who they are. And that's part of what I like to remind people of, is that you shouldn't be defined by this. Yeah, you're going to have to deal with it, but it doesn't define your whole life. And let's try to do the next right thing. And so sometimes that's called mitigation in a court case, and that can take a lot of different forms. But there are situations where the best course of conduct, even with a lawyer, is to admit guilt early, seek a more favorable plea agreement as a result of that, if the prosecutor will play ball with that, and we can negotiate on those things if someone's willing and wanting to admit guilt early. And then do some things that are going to put you in a better position. Sometimes that means making amends to society some way. Sometimes that means fixing some things that are going on inside of you or your loved one, whether that's addiction or anger management or some mental health issues or the like. There's a whole variety of things that can affect these things. I'll give you an example. I've got a case where there was, in a way, a bomb threat that wasn't really a bomb threat or a shoot-up threat, because the person didn't have a weapon. He didn't possess them either where he was or at his home. So it wasn't a real threat, so to speak, but nonetheless it was broadcast on social media, and that scared some people, and it was reported. And what I did is I called the prosecutor early on in the case, like when the case was brand new after I got hired by this guy, and I said, listen, he really feels bad about what he did, and he does, and he wants to make it right, and we're not going to play games and challenge evidence in the case or do those sorts of things or even protract it out. He wants to start doing some things where he can show his remorse and show that he's trying to put himself in a better place so that nobody has to worry about him doing this again. And he also wants to make it right for the business that he scared and its patrons in the community. I can tell you the prosecutor really appreciated that. And then that prosecutor and I put our heads together about some sort of thinking outside the box, ways that this particular defendant could go about making right some of the impact that he caused on other people through this crime. And as a result, he's going to have a very favorable plea agreement down the road in his case, and be able to avoid punishment that otherwise might happen if we didn't handle the case that way. So I just want you people, whether you're prospective criminal defendants or your family members that are supporting someone going through this, to know that these are options out there and they're worth pursuing. Now, prosecutors, as a fair warning to you, prosecutors do have a large amount of power and discretion. Some of them will say sometimes, we're not interested in letting him or her do these sorts of things. They're going to punish her regardless, and that's their discretion. Other times, a prosecutor won't agree to it, but we do what's called a straight plea down the road, which is where there's no plea agreement with the prosecution, but rather we leave it to a judge's hands and ask for a more favorable outcome from the judge than the prosecutor was willing to offer. So each case is unique that way, but I want to let you know that there are options in a lot of cases, and it's the right way to go. So make sure you talk through these issues with an experienced lawyer, a lawyer that's willing to listen to this and explore not only why you're here, but what led up to you having a criminal case, and more about your life, so we can try to put this all together and come up with a unique plan that will serve what your needs are, but then also restore trust with the prosecution and the court and the community. And oftentimes that'll lead to a better sentence or plea agreement in a criminal case. If you have any more questions, my name is Ryan Pacyga. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Minnesota, and you can always reach out to me at 612-339-5844 or arrestedmn.com. And if you found this video helpful, please let me know in the comments. I'd like to know just what's helping people out there. If you've got other questions that I can answer, let me know in the comments as well. And I'd be happy when I get time to go through the comments. I'm busy quite a bit, but when I get time, I'll go through them and I'll see if I can be helpful with more questions. Thanks, everybody.